I absolutely despised the gatherings at the country club. Every few weeks, it seemed like these people found a new excuse to throw yet another over-the-top party, just so a bunch of wealthy folks could indulge in their own self-importance. My wife, Lisa, on the other hand, loved them. She looked forward to each one like it was the highlight of her month. Unfortunately, over the past year, she had started drinking more than usual at these events, sometimes to the point of embarrassing herself, or worse, me. Lisa and I had been married for 25 years. We had 3 kids, all of whom were now in college. I met her while working on my MBA, and from the start, things just clicked between us. But somewhere along the way, probably around 10 years ago, our relationship lost its spark. I figured it was just a natural progression of a long marriage. Sure, I would have appreciated more affection, a little more intimacy, but I wasn't the kind of guy to push the issue. I had resigned myself to the idea that the rest of my life would be, well, less than romantic. Financially, we were in a good place. A great place, actually. Putting 3 kids through college had taken a big chunk out of our savings, but we were still comfortable. Lisa had never needed to work, and she had no interest in changing that. Her days were filled with charity events, social gatherings, and community projects, all of which required my income to sustain. She still looked great for her age, though I had no doubt that was thanks to the countless hours and dollars spent at the spa and salon. I, on the other hand, was fairly average. Some extra weight around the middle, a bit of gray at my temples. I dressed well, mostly because my job required it, and because Lisa had a passion for shopping. I was good at what I did, but I wasn't happy. Lately, I'd been itching to try something new, something I would actually enjoy, regardless of the paycheck. I also wanted to move. The house was way too big for just the 2 of us, and I hated the constant upkeep. But Lisa wouldn't even entertain the conversation. To her, the idea of leaving behind her dream house, the country club, and her circle of wealthy friends was simply absurd. At one of these dreaded gatherings, I found myself drifting from one meaningless conversation to the next, half listening to people talk about things that didn't matter. The night dragged on, and I had been nursing the same drink for over an hour. Lisa, however, was just hitting her stride. From the looks of it, she had been drinking more than usual, and it was beginning to show. I walked into a room where about 8 or 10 of the club's socialites were gathered, deep in conversation. As I approached, I caught just enough to realize the topic was sex, my cue to turn around and head the other way. But just as I pivoted to leave, Lisa's voice cut through the chatter, louder than normal and slurred with alcohol. Hell, if it wasn't for Jake Carter, I would have never had good sex in my entire life. The room fell silent. A few women immediately turned their eyes toward me, realizing I had overheard every word. Lisa, seemingly oblivious, continued to giggle drunkenly, her cheeks flushed from both alcohol and amusement. Then, as if suddenly sensing the shift in the atmosphere, she turned and locked eyes with me. "Oh, David, I didn't see you there," she slurred, still grinning. "You weren't supposed to hear that, darling. My bad." She followed it up with another set of giggles, like a mischievous child caught in the act. The women around her didn't know how to react. Some quietly excused themselves from the conversation, while others remained frozen, unsure of whether to pretend they hadn't heard or to offer me some kind of sympathy. Lisa, meanwhile, sat there smirking, seemingly unfazed by what had just happened. I didn't say a word. I simply set my glass down on a nearby table, turned, and walked out of the room, out of the club. But I didn't go home. Instead, I drove straight to the airport. 30 minutes later, I was on a commuter flight to Reno. I had always preferred Reno over Vegas. There was something about it that felt less artificial, less staged. And now, as I sat on that plane, my mind raced with realizations. Suddenly, my marriage, our entire relationship, made so much more sense. The cracks I had ignored, the distance I had dismissed as normal, they weren't coincidences. A weekend away in Reno might not fix anything, but it would at least give me time to think. The moment I landed, I shut off my phone. I had no desire to deal with whatever drunken apologies or excuses Lisa might attempt to throw my way. At the casino, I opened an account with a $20,000 deposit, which instantly got me a complimentary room. One of the interesting things about casino accounts is that, since they aren't actual banks, they aren't subject to federal regulations. That means no reports to the government. Sure, if you hit a jackpot on a slot machine, you have to report it, but anything you deposit into your account? Completely untraceable. I wasn't much of a gambler, but I liked the financial privacy. I woke up late the next day, shaking off the exhaustion of the previous night. Over a burger and fries, I mulled over my situation. Reno had a lot going for it. Great weather, reasonable cost of living, plenty of services thanks to the gaming industry. After lunch, I took a walk by the Truckee River, a tradition for those whose marriages had fallen apart. I wasn't planning on filing for a Reno divorce just yet, but something about tossing my wedding ring into that river at a later date felt symbolic. As I wandered back toward the hotel, I passed a real estate office with dozens of condo listings in the window. Suddenly, the idea of having my own place here didn't seem so crazy. I walked in, spent an hour with an agent, and then another 2 hours touring properties. Eventually, I found a small, furnished unit that I really liked. The only problem? I couldn't buy it while still married. Luckily, I was able to set up a discreet lease-to-buy arrangement with a hefty deposit. That part was my idea, and the seller was more than happy to accept. One of the smartest things I had done early in my marriage was managing all of our finances myself. Lisa had never been good with numbers, and as long as she could spend freely, she had no interest in the details. That meant I had the freedom to make moves like this without raising any red flags. That night, I treated myself to a sushi dinner, then topped off my casino account with another $10,000 from my card. I hated paying the cash advance fee, but in this case, it was worth it. The next morning, I was up early and grabbed breakfast at the casino restaurant. A classic plate: eggs, bacon, hash browns, and toast. As I sipped my second cup of coffee, I noticed my waitress trying to hide a black eye beneath her hair. She looked to be in her mid-40s, attractive, but there was something about her that suggested she was new to this kind of work. Her name tag read Donna. "Is that your real name?" I asked. She hesitated before offering a small smile. "No, it's Dora." But this was the closest name tag they had. "Well, Dora, I'll take another coffee," I said, "and I promise to leave a big tip if you tell me what happened to your eye." She let out a dry chuckle. "How about I pour you that refill, you leave a smaller tip, and we just pretend you never asked?" "Fair enough," I said, raising my hands in surrender. It had been rude of me to pry. After breakfast, I decided to get a few things to make my new place feel like home. First stop, a used car lot down the street. I picked up a beat-up Ford Focus, not great for a long trip, but perfect for running around town. I could have just rented something, but I planned on coming back to Reno regularly. At this point, I had no doubt, this was just the beginning. By the time I was done gathering the essentials, a few changes of clothes, toiletries, and other necessities, I had everything I needed to live comfortably for the foreseeable future. The rest of my day was spent strategically opening accounts at several casinos. I wrote checks made out to each establishment, deposited the money into my accounts, and just like that, the funds disappeared. No audit trail, no paper record. By the end of the day, I had managed to spread $60,000 across 4 different casinos. To keep track, I picked up a small spiral notebook that fit easily into my pocket. In it, I recorded the dates, casino names, and amounts I had lost gambling over the weekend. Of course, I hadn't actually lost a cent, but who was going to question me? Everyone knew I was a terrible poker player, so any supposed losses at roulette, blackjack, or craps would be completely believable. I had 6 months to come up with the down payment for my condo, but with this setup, that wouldn't be a problem. I had been so preoccupied that I completely forgot about lunch, so by the time dinner rolled around, I was starving. The easiest option was to return to the same diner where I had eaten breakfast earlier that day. As luck would have it, Dora was still working. "You're still here?" I asked as she approached my table. "Looks like a long day." She let out a tired sigh. "Yeah, I'm working double shifts just to get by. I had no idea rent was this expensive here. What can I get you to drink?" I decided not to pry any further. She looked exhausted, and I figured she didn't need another person asking about her problems. I ordered my meal and did my best to keep things light for the rest of the time. When I finished eating, she dropped off my check, but lingered for a moment. I wanted to say sorry for being so short with you this morning, she said. I'm still adjusting to being here, and, well, I'm a little self-conscious about the eye. She hesitated before adding, it was a parting gift from my husband when I told him I was leaving to get a divorce. Not the first one, but hopefully the last. She forced a small smile. Thanks for the nice tip at breakfast, by the way. It helps. As she walked away, I could tell that smile wasn't genuine. It was the kind of smile people give when they're trying to convince themselves things will be okay. I thought about her for the rest of the night. At that point, I realized I had done just about everything I could for now. There were still things I needed to take care of back home before I could fully set myself up here. I booked a flight for the next morning, though I wasn't exactly sure what I'd do once I landed. When I stopped by the diner for breakfast, Dora was still on shift. I managed to get a table in her section and waited until she came by with the check before speaking up. I've got a bit of a problem, and I was wondering if you could help me out, I said. She raised an eyebrow, wary. That depends. I have to leave today, and won't be back for about a week. I need someone to house sit for me. It's a 2-bedroom condo, so you'd have your own space. No living conflicts, I promise. It'd be for at least a couple of months. She blinked at me, skeptical. Are you serious? No strings attached? I nodded. I just don't like the idea of leaving the place empty all the time. 90% of the time, it'll just be you, and when I am in town, I'll stay out of your way. You have my word. The truth was, I didn't actually care if someone broke in and took everything. There wasn't much of value there anyway, but Dora didn't need to know that. Is it within walking distance of the diner? She asked. It's pretty close, I assured her. But I'm also leaving you my car. It's a dark blue Ford Focus, parked at the condo. Just make sure it always has gas for when I come back. I'll call ahead of time before I return. There's a machine on the phone? Dora just stared at me, clearly uncertain. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, like she was waiting for the catch. But I didn't have time to convince her. I slid the condo key and the car key across the table. Here's the address, I said, scribbling it down on a napkin. If you're not comfortable with it, don't go. No hard feelings. I'll pick up the keys when I'm back next Friday. She took the napkin and the keys but didn't say anything. Dora, don't worry about it, I added. If it works out, great. If not, that's fine too. An hour later, I was on my flight home. I would have preferred to stay in Reno. After landing, I retrieved my car from the long-term parking lot and drove by the house. Lisa's car was gone, which made my next move easy. I ran inside and grabbed everything I needed for the next couple of weeks: clothes, shoes, important documents, my laptop. The whole process took less than 10 minutes. Luckily, my company had several kitchenette-style corporate apartments available for employees. Since my position allowed me to use one at my discretion, I reserved one for the next 2 weeks. I plugged in my laptop to charge, then called my eldest son, Ryan. Hey, bud, I said. I wanted to give you a heads up. Your mom and I are dealing with some personal issues, so I'll be a bit tied up for a while. Can you fill your sisters in and let them know there's nothing to worry about? All 3 of my kids were attending Auburn. I had managed to secure a group discount, but out-of-state tuition still wasn't cheap. At least I could afford it. After hanging up, I put my phone on the charger and took a long shower. The only thing I'd eaten all day was a bag of peanuts on the plane, and I was more than ready for a proper meal. Monday was busy. First thing in the morning, I went straight to the bank and took out a second mortgage on the house, a big one. By the end of the month, that would no longer be my problem. From there, I contacted Auburn directly and arranged a prepaid tuition plan for all 3 kids. The bank wired $240,000 directly to the school. That still left me with a cashier's check for just over $200,000 to take back to Reno. I cashed out 2 CDs, paid the penalty fees, and emptied the money market account. The credit cards, however, I decided to leave alone, for now. By the time I arrived at the office, I was running late. My secretary, Emily, was waiting for me with black coffee and a knowing smirk. Morning, mister, she said. So, are you going to tell me what happened at the country club Friday, or should I just believe all the rumors? I sighed. Emily, the rumors are all true. Without missing a beat, she replied, Got it. Anything else you need from me? Yes. I need everything you can find on Jake Carter. I think he used to work here, but I'm not sure. Also, reschedule all my appointments and meetings. Don't give anyone a reason why. Emily grinned. Got it. I had originally thought it would take weeks to get everything in order. Now, I realized I could wrap it all up in less than a week. I called my lawyer, Jerry Proctor, and scheduled an immediate appointment. On the way out, I told Emily not to forward any calls from Lisa and to instruct security not to let her into the building. Jerry had been a friend since college. He never liked Lisa, which made him the perfect man for the job. I was at the country club Friday, Jerry said as I sat down, so I think I already know why you're here. You're right. It's about time, he said, smirking. Now, what do you need from me? Full access to all my accounts and a couple of powers of attorney. You got it. Anything else? I leaned forward. Jerry, I have a serious problem. The trauma of Friday triggered something in me. I've developed a gambling addiction. I spent the weekend in Reno and lost thousands. Jerry grinned. I assume you've been keeping records of all these terrible losses? Oh, absolutely. Good man, he said. Now get out of here and take care of business. I had sworn I wouldn't repeat what was said in that conversation, but it looked like I wasn't going to be able to keep that promise. If at any point you find something I say offensive, she said, her tone firm, you're free to get up and walk out. That'll be the end of our discussion. And if you don't like what you hear, don't take it out on me. I'm just giving you the facts. Do you understand, mister? I nodded. I understand. I'd like to think I'm mature enough to handle whatever you tell me without throwing a tantrum. She frowned slightly, unimpressed by my attempt at humor. About 3.5 years ago, she began, your wife, Lisa, approached Jake Carter at a company event. There was a lot of drinking that night, and before the evening was over, the two of them ended up having sex in one of the private offices. The problem was, Jake was getting married the following month. I clenched my jaw but said nothing. Lisa threatened to tell his fiancée unless he kept seeing her. He hoped that once he was married, she'd lose interest, but she didn't. She kept pressuring him into meeting her for months, using the threat of exposure to keep him compliant. Eventually, in desperation, Jake came to me for help. He had to tell me the full story, of course, but there wasn't much I could do. I couldn't, in good conscience, go to you or anyone else with this information. The best solution I had was to transfer Jake to another office. Once he relocated to another office, Lisa left him alone. As far as I know, he never told his wife about any of this. I exhaled slowly, absorbing the weight of her words. Any questions? She asked. I shook my head. It looks like Jake was as much a victim in this mess as I was. I was considering some sort of payback, but that seems pretty pointless now. She nodded. Now that you know the truth, you hold all the power here. My advice? Let it die. Jake Carter is a good employee and an asset to the company. Don't ruin his career over something your wife did. I stood up. Thanks for your time. And yeah, you're probably right. Being forced to sleep with my wife was punishment enough. For the first time since our meeting started, she cracked a small smile. By the way, she said as we walked toward the door, it's Mrs. Grimm. I've been married for 32 years. I had a hard time picturing Wilma, stern, all-business Wilma, in bed with a man. Then again, maybe when she let her hair down, she turned into some kind of sex goddess. The thought made me uncomfortable, and I quickly pushed it out of my head. I had bigger things to worry about. Back in my office, Emily had managed to clear my schedule, leaving me with a clean slate. Lisa had called 3 times, refusing to believe I was in Baltimore. Emily had also scheduled an appointment for me with the company president the next day, and one with the legal department that afternoon. Join me for dinner tonight? I asked her. She laughed. My husband might have a problem with that. You should ask Wilma instead. She laughed again before heading back to her desk. The legal meeting took longer than I'd expected, and I ended up keeping a few people past office hours. I apologized, but they all seemed to understand. Untangling my finances was proving to be more complicated than I'd anticipated. Redeeming my retirement plan for a lump sum was a hassle, though cashing out my money and shared savings went smoothly, even if it was time-consuming. Converting my sick leave, vacation days, and company insurance was relatively easy. By the time I walked out, it was clear to everyone. I was leaving the company. I just hoped the news wouldn't reach Lisa before I was ready. I ended up eating dinner alone. For some reason, I found myself thinking about Dora. Had she moved into the condo? Was she still pulling double shifts at the diner? It was ridiculous. I barely knew her. But for whatever reason, I was looking forward to going back to Reno and seeing her. It felt juvenile, and I tried to put it out of my mind. Wasting time on fantasies was pointless. The next morning, I liquidated 2 whole life insurance policies and canceled 2 term policies. I was shocked at how much the whole life policies had accumulated over the years. The payout checks would be ready by the next morning. Since my company covered my car insurance, I left that alone, but I made sure to cancel the policy on Lisa's Lexus. The lease was in her name, but the insurance had been under mine. Before heading into work, I stopped by office, dropped off my financial worksheet, and signed a stack of documents his secretary had prepared. Emily had coffee waiting for me when I got back to the office. "Not to rub salt in the wound, boss," she said, "but before you see Richard, you need to talk to Calvin Bostic in settlements." Richard Ryder was the company president. I had no doubt he already knew why I wanted to meet with him. Settlements was tucked away in the basement, practically the dungeon of the building. I never understood why that department got stuck with no windows while everyone else had sunlight. Calvin was a quiet, no-nonsense guy. Efficient, dependable, but not exactly thrilling. He led me to a private corner before speaking. "I've been hearing things about what's going on in your office," he said. "I don't do gossip, but I figured you needed to know this. About 6 years ago, we had a guy working here named Ray Upright. Married, 2 kids. Decent guy. He ended up getting tangled up with your wife after an office party. After that night, she kept calling him, both at home and at work. He regretted what happened and wanted to end things, but she wouldn't let him. She threatened to tell his wife if he cut things off. He finally called her bluff. I had a sinking feeling about where this was going. 2 days later, Ray's wife kicked him out. He started drinking, lost his job, and, well, I don't know where he is now. But before she left him, his wife threatened to tell you about the affair. From what I understand, your wife paid her 10 grand to keep quiet." I exhaled sharply. "Jesus. Look, I wasn't trying to upset you," Calvin said. "Emily just thought you should know." I forced a nod. "I appreciate it, Cal. Thanks." I took the elevator straight to the 9th floor. I was early for my meeting with Ryder, but he took me in right away. The conversation was short and to the point. The legal department, personnel, and payroll would handle everything for me. When the dust settled, he told me to call him personally, wherever I ended up. He handed me a card with his private number scrawled on the back. No promises, no regrets, no lingering questions. I gave him a simple nod and left without a word. Back in my office, Emily was waiting with another cup of coffee, smiling. I smiled back. "Book me a flight to Reno for Thursday morning. Make sure there's a 2-hour layover in Dallas." She gestured toward the window. "Take a look outside." Down in the parking lot, Lisa was arguing with a security guard. "She's been down there for at least 20 minutes, Emily said. "They won't let her in, and she refuses to leave." "What do you want to do, boss?" I watched for a moment, then shrugged. "Looks like the guards have it under control. My only problem right now is figuring out who I'm having dinner with tonight. I hate eating alone." I called Jerry to check in. He told me he couldn't move forward until my finances were squared away. "I need proof you don't have any money right now," he said. I smirked. "Well, Jerry, that's the one thing I can give you." Between the checks I had in hand, those still on the way, and the cash in my bank accounts, I was sitting on a small fortune. I had promised myself I'd head to Reno early and stay there until I was completely broke, though, in reality, that would take some effort. Every now and then, someone would poke their head into my office to tell me that Lisa was calling again. Apparently, she had roped all her friends into tracking me down by having their husbands check in at work. I ignored it. Instead, I stayed at the office a few more hours, tying up loose ends and making things as smooth as possible for my replacement. When I finally stepped outside, Lisa was sitting on the hood of my car, waiting. Emily, ever the lifesaver, smirked as she handed me the keys to her Honda Civic. "Take my car," she said. "This is a perfect excuse for my husband to pick me up and take me out for dinner." I gave her a grateful smile. "By the way, You don't think I'm going to do anything stupid in Dallas, do you? She raised an eyebrow. No revenge plots? I shook my head. No vengeance, I promise. Just tying up some loose ends. With that, I got in Emily's car and drove straight to Allentown, where I had dinner at the Outback Steakhouse before heading back to my apartment. I was in bed before midnight. The next morning flew by. I signed more papers with Jerry, closed out all my bank accounts, and canceled every credit card Lisa and I had. I even arranged to have the utilities at the house shut off by the following week. I picked up my final checks from the bank, the insurance company, and my employer. Until that moment, I had never realized just how much money I was worth. Next, I got a new cell phone and canceled the old ones Lisa and I shared. I even sold my country club membership to an old friend for $23,000, one less connection to that life. When I stopped by the office one last time, my replacement was already settling in. He was a decent guy, originally from Boston, and had made the move on just 24 hours' notice. He knew it was a great career move, and frankly, Emily knew more about running the office than I ever did. So there wasn't much training required. There were a few personal items at the house I might have liked to grab, but nothing worth going back for. Emily insisted I keep her car, and said her husband would pick it up from the airport later. I grabbed a couple of cheap suitcases for my things, but anything I forgot, I could replace in Reno. Then it hit me. I had officially done everything I could. My assets were all in cash. No stocks, no accounts, no investments. The only thing left was the house, and I was willingly handing that over to Lisa. When I called the airline, they were more than happy to bump my flight up. I rang Jerry from home. Hey, buddy, just letting you know I'm heading out tonight. You've got everything squared away? Yep. I could actually serve the divorce papers tomorrow, but I still need that financial proof. You might as well go ahead and serve them. I'll start sending you plenty of evidence of financial irresponsibility soon enough. Jerry chuckled. Just be careful, Bob. I don't want either of us getting into trouble. Lisa will probably get a big-shot lawyer, most likely from Philly. But if it's a contingency case, he might drop her as soon as things start looking bad. I smirked. That's on you, Jerry. Just do the best you can for me, without padding the bill too much. I'm about to be a very poor man, remember? Noted, Jerry said. Anything else? Yeah, if you can track down a guy named Raymond Upright, let me know. Depending on his situation, I might want to help him out. You got it. Safe flight, Bobby. Keep in touch. Before heading out, I called the condo and left a message on the machine, letting Dora know I'd be arriving late that night. I didn't want her to be startled if she heard someone at the door. At that point, I had no idea if she had even moved in, but I hoped she had. It was strange. I barely knew this woman, and yet I found myself looking forward to seeing her again. Even if it was just as friends, I wouldn't mind having her around. Given everything she'd been through, I didn't want her to feel like I was taking advantage of the situation. I landed in Dallas early enough to grab a decent breakfast before heading to Todd Mitchell's office. When he walked in and saw me sitting there, his expression immediately soured. Mr. Terrell, he said, his tone flat. I'd love to say it's nice to see you, but I'd be lying. I think we both know that. I held up a hand. Relax, Todd, and if you don't mind, I'll drop the formalities. I'm not here to make your life hell. He folded his arms. Then what are you here for? I just wanted to let you know that I understand the situation you were in back then. There are no hard feelings. You could have told me that over the phone. I know, but I was passing through, and I felt it was worth my time to clear the air in person. Todd frowned. I don't get it. Why would you do this? I'm the one who screwed up. I should be the one apologizing to you. You made a mistake, sure, I admitted, but you weren't the only one to blame. Lisa created a mess that affected both of us. I'm not saying you were innocent, but I don't think it's fair for you to carry more guilt than necessary. What she did was manipulative, and it caused problems for you and for me. Todd ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. I don't even know what to say to that. You don't have to say anything, I said, handing him one of Jerry's business cards. Later today, give my lawyer a call. He might ask you for a favor, but if he does, it'll be discreet. At most, he might want a notarized statement confirming the affair. I promise it won't get back to your wife. Todd hesitated before finally taking the card. We shook hands before I left. It felt strange, shaking hands with a man who had slept with my wife, but somehow, it also felt like the right thing to do. Todd wasn't a bad guy. He had just been caught in the crossfire. An hour later, I was back on my flight to Reno. As I stared out the window, I kept asking myself what I had done wrong. I had worked hard to provide for my family, making sure Lisa and the kids had everything they could ever need. I thought I had done a damn good job, but while I had been focused on taking care of everyone else, I had neglected my marriage. It's human nature to try to find a reason, to figure out why things happen, and I could accept my part in it. But what I couldn't accept was Lisa turning me into a fool. If she had at least been discreet, I might have let it go. I probably would have blamed myself forever, but she wasn't discreet, and I would not take the blame. When I landed at Reno Tahoe International, I was pleasantly surprised to see Dora waiting for me at baggage claim. She was wearing jeans and a light blue Oxford shirt, the first time I had ever seen her in something other than her diner uniform. I smiled. "Evening, Dora. I wasn't expecting you." She shrugged. "Figured since I had your car, it was the least I could do." "You're not working?" "Nope. I was able to cut back, thanks to your generous offer." I grinned. "Generous? I was just trying to find a way to be alone with you." Dora smirked. "And what exactly are you planning to do with me once you get me alone?" I laughed. "No idea. I haven't thought that far ahead. Any suggestions?" She blushed slightly as I grabbed my bags. I figured I should back off before I scared her away, but I had a feeling she was testing the waters, and that was a good sign. 30 minutes later, we were back at my newly decorated condo. It wasn't a major transformation, just small touches that made the place feel like home. That night, we shared a bottle of wine and 2 prime rib dinners. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Dora gave me a cautious look, as if bracing for my reaction. "I put most of it in the bank," she said hesitantly, "but I needed a place to live, so I bought us a house." I blinked. "You what?" She bit her lip. "I was hoping you wouldn't mind. You had a lot of money in that account, Robert." I figured it made sense. I took a deep breath, still trying to process what she just said. Then she grabbed my hand and smiled. "Come see it before you get mad." I followed her through the winding streets until we reached a gorgeous hacienda-style home in a quiet neighborhood. The walls were painted a warm terracotta, with bright blue shutters, and a courtyard filled with blooming flowers. It was beautiful, and so was the woman standing next to me. Dora watched me carefully, waiting for a reaction. I grinned. I like it when a plan comes together. Her face lit up, and she kissed me. I had no complaints. Lisa's parents somehow managed to scrape together enough money to cover her bail and her legal fees, but it didn't do her much good. Jerry had no trouble getting her to sign the divorce papers, and in the end, she was sentenced to 5 to 8 years for attempted murder for hire. To this day, I still don't know why she wanted me dead. Todd Mitchell had provided Jerry with a deposition, but we never even had to use it. As for Ray Upright, Jerry finally tracked him down. He was sober but struggling to get back on his feet. When Jerry asked what he could do to help, Ray had a simple request. "I'd love to have a hot dog pushcart." For $2,400, I made that happen. The IRS was surprisingly easy to deal with. I settled my entire beef with them for $4,000, less than I had spent on some of Lisa's handbags. As for Leo, he landed himself in a Nevada prison, sharing a cell block with Tony and his brothers. Dora and I had a good laugh about that one. With my name cleared and the law off my back, I was finally free to go home. To my surprise, my old job was still waiting for me, with a promotion attached. Emily was eager for me to return, and honestly, I was looking forward to it too. The new position was a step up for both of us, and it felt good knowing I had something solid to return to. Dora and I planned to get married as soon as her Mexican divorce was finalized. The kids would be coming down for the wedding during their spring break. The house in Guadalajara was perfect, but we were pretty sure we wouldn't be staying there full-time. Dora wanted to keep it as a vacation home, and I had no objections. At the end of the day, the only thing that really mattered was that we stayed together. Speaking of which, Dora gave me a mischievous smile one evening over dinner. "I want to meet Lisa," she said. I nearly choked on my drink. "You what?" She shrugged. "I just think it would be interesting." "Yeah, Interesting was one way to put it. My plans didn't go anything like I had imagined. But looking at the woman across from me, the life we were building together, and the future ahead of us, I wouldn't change a damn thing. Dear listener, if you've made it this far, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It would mean a lot to me.